Today we're going to get into a discussion about what defund the police actually means, because I think there are people who may misinterpret it. It's basically calling for complete changes and reform in the system. So let's talk about the changes that need to happen in the criminal justice system. What can we do? Because there's a lot that needs fixing, and it's not just in the police departments where you see injustices occur. It's in the whole system. So let's get right into it. What is meant by defund the police? Simply put, it means reducing the amount of resources that exist within the system and are continuing to allow these injustices to occur. What can be done with those resources? Put them into creating a better system for the community. What would total reform look like? Minimizing how their role is defined within the system, getting rid of their power so they can no longer abuse it, putting more money into how they are educated and trained, fixing the unjust court system and sentencing laws, and much more. Minimize how their role is defined within the system. A significantly small amount of arrests that occur are violent where we may need law enforcement to show up. But for the other significant amount of incidences where non-violent scenes are occurring, we may not really need someone with a gun to show up. It should only be for emergency interventions that may require force. For the non-violent situations, we could start shifting the role into other places and have on-call professionals show up to scenes where it is not necessary for a law enforcement officer, such as a school-based offense or a case of a mental health crisis or homelessness. Many sources say resources would be better placed in creating a systematic change of first responders being mental health providers, caseworkers, or victim advocates in those situations. Let's talk about police burnout. Currently, the way the system is, there can be a huge stress burnout rate in relation to the roles of a police officer. To list a few of those roles, they can vary from controlling traffic, crime scene investigations, high-speed pursuits, patrolling neighborhoods, emergency phone call responses, writing citations, delivering warrants, arresting violators, and submitting incident reports. These become daily activities and can sometimes be very dangerous situations. It could begin to take a toll on the police officer's attitudes and perceptions. The high job demands have often been known to increase the amount of burnout in law enforcement agencies that exist. There are many disadvantages to having stress burnout. It has a negative impact not only on the individual experiencing it, but also to the community they are trying to protect, as well as to the police department itself. Physical and psychological responses include irritability, impaired judgment, and loss of energy, resulting in poor performance such as low morale, chronic absenteeism, and high turnover rates. How burnout affects public's opinion of police. If it's affecting their mood and their behavior at work, in addition to their mental health, it's obviously going to put a strain on the way they handle various stressful situations that come up often in their line of duty. For people in high positions of power, burnout is not good. Due to the system's current high job demand and the negative effects that come with it as a cause of burnout, it seems to reason that diminishing some of the roles that are required of them would be a very good thing for the system, not only for the minority community and the public, but for the officers themselves as well. What would a better system look like? How about when a first responder in law enforcement is called to a scene where there is an emergent situation, in addition, they send an advocate to the scene as well. Someone who can advocate for anyone else at the scene in case any type of abuse in power does occur. They could be there to step up and advocate for that person's life when in need of help in that situation. All advocates would have to go through a strict hiring process and multicultural diversity training. Let's talk about education. How about we put more resources into providing better training for our law enforcement and first responders as well? I don't just mean gun training and police training. I mean training on learning very specific character skills to not only change police attitudes but police behavior as well. Empathy training can train police to listen, stay calm, and communicate more effectively. They are less likely to over-arrest and are more likely to use less force. Crisis intervention training. Police can learn how to handle crisis situations, taking away that warrior mentality and replacing it with empathy. This increases community relationships while decreasing use of force. Police should also get first aid training to actually be applied after shootings or injuries have occurred. And cultural competence training. Let's talk about cultural competence. This is a police-defined version and what they learn in trainings about cultural competence. I found a training program that went into detail about what police learn about cultural competence, and here is what I discovered about their trainings. They learn 4 practices: treating people in the intercultural environment with dignity and respect, giving voice to people during the regulatory process, displaying transparency in decision-making, conveying trustworthiness and motives. Officers observe how conflict management is differentiated across cultures in 4 patterns: justice, honor, harmony, and reciprocity. The course has 2 primary objectives for students: to understand cultural diversity and to acquire cultural competence skills to interact with people of diverse cultures. They ask, what is culture? How does culture work? What are the 4 patterns of culture? What is cultural intelligence? What are the 6 stages of development in cultural competence? And they discuss diversity and inclusion, conflict management, and conflict resolution. Then they have the evaluation. While these are important topics to discuss and it's a good start to the program, I'd say it's a part 1, 2, and at best 2-part training series. They discuss the topic too generally, and I'll tell you what I mean in a minute, but first let me tell you what cultural competence does mean. What is cultural competence? What we learn in school for mental health and psychology is that it involves a great deal of being culturally aware. It is always important to be culturally aware of the groups in which one is working with. Being unaware can lead to biases or stereotypes, or it can even lead to being viewed as insensitive, ignorant, or uneducated. Self-awareness is key as well. They need to be able to be familiar with their own identity so that it is less likely to shape the way they perceive others' cultures and belief systems based on their own experiences. So it's about valuing diversity, conducting self-assessment, managing the dynamics of difference, acquiring and institutionalizing cultural knowledge, and adapting to diversity in the cultural contexts of communities they serve. Cultural competence requires professionals to be capable of efficiently working with individuals of other backgrounds in a way that is able to honor and respect the beliefs, language, interpersonal styles, and behaviors of individuals or groups of individuals that are being worked with. Knowledge about each culture and their beliefs and customs is necessary for this, as well as learning effective skills about how to communicate with them. Then, based off of what is known about them and their perspective, you can go into a situation working with them and have a stronger impact and probably be able to build a better rapport with them. So what is the difference between the police-defined cultural competence and the mental health-defined cultural competence? Law enforcement needs to have the knowledge and skills to know the different values and beliefs of various cultures so that they can know how to communicate with them better, and so that they are more familiar with their norms and their traditions. Also, sometimes communicating with people of other cultures or races can cause language barriers, so learning communication and language style is another significant thing to be aware of. Another thing to know about becoming culturally competent is that it should be an ongoing process for professionals to consistently go to trainings to educate themselves about various cultures and keep themselves up to date because it can be constantly evolving. This is the way that cultural competence needs to be taught to police. While what they are taught is also true and important, what they are taught, it seems, is very limited. It seems like when I was reading about what they learned, they went over the concepts and patterns of what various terms mean and how to handle various situations when communicating with a diverse group of people as a whole, but it seemed like they skipped over teaching about the various cultures as actual individual cultures so that they could learn how to interact with different ones. Considering that they do have important differences that need full awareness in order to be completely culturally competent, these trainings also need to teach not only cultural awareness, but cultural differences as well. With proper cultural competence training, we can recognize our own culture to help us better understand other cultures. And without this training, our perceptions and culture can self-consciously influence the way we interpret others' behavior. And what about other trainings? There are current trainings set, but it depends on the state, and some do require trainings on racial profiling each year, while others do not. And some states require first aid trainings while others do not. Implicit bias and autism was required in one state, and legal update and mental disorder in another. If they're going to be working with individuals with mental health disorders or with disabilities, these are some examples of other trainings that should be required in all states and probably also need curriculum improvements as well. But of course, firearms training is a requirement in every state, so the system is prioritizing firearms over things that might be more important, which I think is another way that we can start thinking about reform. We need to start thinking about new priorities in the criminal justice system. An example of this is shoot to kill. A priority should not be to kill. How can we limit their use of force? Make officers give warnings before they act forcefully when the situation calls for it, so that the person has time to comply before the forceful action is actually made. Ban specific actions that are inhumane, unjust, and just unnecessary, such as kneeling on the head or neck, chokeholds, strangling, having people face down in the vehicle, hog tying, and no more use of the no-knock warrant. Hold officers accountable when an act of force or police brutality is committed. If there are multiple acts where an officer has violated some form of department policy or use of force, they need to be fired. The incidences need to be investigated when occurred and reports need to be made. So let's talk about shoot to kill. How about we get rid of the shoot to kill training and attitude? So it's not just important to add trainings, but get rid of some as well. This helps to reduce their power and ultimately makes it harder for them to abuse that power. It would then manage how they would be able to use their force, which is also very important as well. Limiting shoot to kill. It says that police are trained to shoot to kill and to shoot as many times as they do because they are supposed to kill when there is a perceived threat. And basically it's so that they aren't killed themselves or anyone else who's innocent around them. So it's like an act of self-defense. And that would be great if it actually was self-defense, except in these cases against the minority communities where they say there is perceived threat, there never actually seems to be any type of threat. So in a perfect system, maybe shoot to kill would be okay, but there's no such thing as a perfect system. And we are a very flawed one. So to me, we gotta get rid of this concept. Besides, what happened to the whole innocent until proven guilty thing? Why does cop just get to make that decision on spot for the system? Why is it okay for this person to not even get a trial before his or her life is ended by some unjustified spur-of-the-moment act of police brutality, where the officer decided that the person of minority must be guilty for something? Which, in a large majority of the time, if they were guilty of anything, it was a non-violent crime. But even if it was a violent crime, why is shooting them okay, when there's an entire court system set in place for the very reason to have a person tried and proven guilty by a court of law and then sentenced? And I do realize that there are certain circumstances where the need to defend yourself or others is real and imminent, and these would be times where proper and effective training would come in. And while we're on the topic, let's talk about the court system, because that's part of the criminal justice system too. And if we were talking about a total reform, then there are plenty of injustices there that need to be fixed as well. Honestly, this could be a whole nother video in and of itself, so I'm not going to go into it all here, but I did want to mention it quickly because this is part of what needs to be fixed as well. The whole system, not just the police departments, not just the courts either, it's in the jails, it's everywhere. We need more fair sentencing laws. Why is it that black people receive sentences for a crime that are 20% longer than white people who are convicted for the exact same crime? Even when the white counterpart is arrested for a very similar offense and with very similar criminal histories. Research has also shown that race plays a significant role in determining which homicide cases end up with a death sentence as well. Some statistics found from 2014 to 2016 showed that black men made up only 6% of the U.S. population and yet 35% of the prison population. And of the 1,900 exonerations that were listed in 2016, 47% of them were African American, so almost half. And they were listed as innocent defendants who were framed and convicted of crimes in large-scale scandals and later cleared. The convictions that led to murder exonerations with black defendants were 22% more likely to include misconduct by police officers than those with white defendants. In addition, those who were black spent 3 years longer in prison before release than those who were white, and those sentenced to death and were black spent 4 years longer. What research tells us about drug use is that African Americans and whites actually use illegal drugs at the same rate. But it doesn't seem like it, because African Americans are 5 times more likely to go to prison for drug possession as whites. And when you look at exonerations, it indicates that innocent black people are about 12 times more likely to be convicted of drug crimes than innocent white people. So why is it that Corey Beatty got a conviction of 15 to 25 years for aggravated rape and 2 counts of sexual battery, while Brock Turner got a conviction of 6 months, but could get out for good behavior after 3 for rape? The circumstances of the crime were almost identical. Both were 19, going to college, Beatty a football player, Turner a swimmer. Both had enough evidence to prove that the rape of an unconscious woman had occurred, Beatty with security camera footage and cell phone videos, Turner with eyewitnesses who saw the occurrence happen, the only difference being that Beatty is black and Turner is white. And I think that a lot of the time, although I am not sure that it's true for this particular case, but a lot of the time where there's injustices occurring in the court system, the answer is because of money. Should we value money or should we value life? What's interesting is that we have a patterned history of people who place greater value on money over human life. In history, it was exemplified through the process of slavery, where people literally placed a monetary value on a human life and either bought or sold slaves for some form of monetary gain or income. And to make matters worse, that is how they treated slaves, as a value, a number, not a human life, and that is all that mattered to the owners of the slaves. Not that there was a life being horribly mistreated, but that they were making a profit or some form of economic gain from the slave's pain and misery. And when one slave died, he or she was easily replaceable. It was the wealth and the money that the slave owners had that they used to justify what they were doing. So why am I talking about a patterned history? Well, because it still shows up today. Maybe not in that extreme, but there are some people today who still have a tendency to place value on wealth over basic human decency. It shows up in for-profit policing and for-profit prisons, which is why we need to put an end to both. So what is for-profit policing? The system profits from stopping, searching, ticketing, and arresting people. And one way that this shows is through quotas. So let's ban departments from using quotas to evaluate performance. Maybe instead they should evaluate their performance based off of knowledge in their job, and maybe they should start including into that knowledge more about diverse matters. For-profit prisons currently hold over 128,000 inmates. They housed higher percentages of black people than public facilities. Why? Because they are trying to exclude those with high medical care on purpose. So they want the younger, healthier inmates who come into the system from the war on drugs, and those are the people who tend to be African American, while older inmates who tend to have more health problems tend to be white. For-profit prisons exist to make money, and in that sense depend strongly on the size of the criminal justice system. Therefore, they join partnerships with specific lawmakers, corporations, and interest groups to advocate for privatization, and have even worked with groups to push for policies that impact sentencing laws to promote mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes laws, and truth in sentencing, all of which contribute to higher prison populations and target minority communities significantly. So this just shows that there is a continued pattern of a system that values monetary gain more than the fair treatment of its own citizens. And it's happening right now too. Today, I do not think it is a value exemplified by a majority of people, but the problem is that the people who do value money over life are the people and organizations who have more political power and influence. But you could even use the coronavirus as an example. There were many Trump supporters and politicians who were willing to risk the lives of the people to get coronavirus for the betterment of the economy. And who gets hit hardest by the coronavirus? The minority groups. So their willingness to reopen the economy is solely based on their belief that bettering the economy is more important than other people's lives. And I'm willing to bet for the betterment of the economy is also likely to benefit their own pockets in a significant way as well. So what else can be done? We need to change the hiring process. Start hiring more diverse officers. Look for candidates who have contributed to strong community service efforts. Check for integrity and honesty. During the interview, look for certain characteristic strengths and skills that could indicate respect for diversity. Check with the sources that they have provided. Improve how the background checks are performed. If we want better cops, then we need to invest in more resources for them. And make the body cams required as well as the dash cams. In addition, we need to make it required that if an incident of use of force or police brutality occurs, the partner must intervene and stop the situation. He or she must also report it to their supervisor, who needs to hold the person accountable, so that no more cover-ups occur. Am I saying no police and let's not pay the police? No, I am not. I am saying put restrictions on the amount of power they have. I am saying put reasonable limitations on their roles and actions. I am saying that they need more education and training. So really, in a way, what I'm actually saying is that the system needs more funding and more resources to get all of this achieved. So I don't believe that the police need to stop being paid, and I don't believe that that is what is meant by the defund the police statement at all. But a significant amount of our resources are being used towards a failed system right now, so we just want to make a shift in how those resources are used to make the system better, so that we're investing in the right thing. Take owning a really old car, for example. If you continue to drive a run-down old car that doesn't work well, eventually your use will take its toll. You can keep investing in the car, and the money that you put into it may work for a little while, but because of how old the car is, new problems just keep popping up, so you just have to keep investing more and more. Or you can get rid of the old car and use that money to invest in a brand new one that is updated and you know will be able to run. Let's treat this the same way. Let's stop investing in something that isn't working for us and start investing in a new system. I really hope that this helped you understand what needs to be done, at least from my perspective and what I've researched. And I really hope that you guys do your own research as well, because I'm sure there's a lot more that can be done as well. You can go to thesentencingproject.org, or you can go to joincampaignzero.org. There is so much information on that website where you can learn about different policy solutions that are trying to be put into effect. You can look at your own state and track the progress of legislation to address police violence at the federal, state, and local levels. You can donate your own funds if you have the means, and you can even propose your own solutions if you have ideas that you think will help. I linked both websites down below. Check them out. And leave a comment if you think you have any of your own ideas about how else we can contribute. Please like and subscribe if you want to see more from me, and that's all the information that I have for you today. Thanks so much for watching.